There's a moment most people never see coming. It doesn't arrive with a notification. It doesn't ring a bell. But one morning, quietly, something changes and your retirement account starts doing something it's never done before. It starts growing faster than you can feed it. Think about what that actually means. Every month for years, maybe decades, you've been the engine. You earn. You transfer a slice of that earnings into your retirement account. You watch the number go up a little. You feel good for maybe 30 seconds. Then life takes over and you stop thinking about it. And that's the deal, right? Show up. Contribute. Wait. Then repeat. But there's a point, a specific, real, mathematical point, where that deal changes completely. Where the market itself starts contributing more to your retirement than your monthly deposits do. Where the portfolio stops depending on you and starts carrying you instead. That's what this video is about. The moment your contributions no longer matter the way they used to. The point where the machine you spent years building finally takes over, and you realize that you were never supposed to contribute forever. Most people don't know this moment exists. They spend their entire working life thinking retirement is about discipline and sacrifice and never missing a contribution. And discipline matters. It absolutely does. But what nobody tells you is that discipline is only the first chapter. There's a second chapter. And in the second chapter, the rules completely change. Some of you are closer to that second chapter than you think. Some of you have already crossed the line without realizing it. And some of you are going to watch this and finally understand why the first years of investing felt so slow and why the last years are going to feel completely different. Let's start at the beginning. Picture a seesaw. On one side, you have your monthly contributions, the money you move from your paycheck into your retirement account every single month. On the other side, you have market growth, what the investments inside your account earn on their own, without you doing anything. Early in your investing life, your side of the seesaw is heavier. Your contributions are doing most of the work. The portfolio is small, so even a good year in the market, say 10% growth, doesn't add that much in raw dollars. If you have $10,000 invested and the market returns 10%, that's $1,000. Meanwhile, you might be contributing $500 or $600 a month. Your money matters far more than the markets at that stage. But here's where it gets interesting. Every single month, your portfolio grows. And as it grows, 10% of it becomes a bigger and bigger number. By the time you have $100,000 invested, a 10% year gives you $10,000. That's starting to compete with your contributions. By $200,000, that same 10% gives you $20,000. You need to be contributing nearly $1,700 a month just to keep up with what the market is adding. By $500,000, 10% is $50,000. That's more than many people earn in a single year, just sitting there being added to your account while you sleep. This is the seesaw tipping. Your contributions start to weigh less and less. The market's contribution starts to weigh more and more. And eventually, if you stay in long enough and you don't do anything to break the machine, the seesaw flips completely. The market is doing the heavy lifting. You're just watching. Now, some people hear this and think, well, then it doesn't matter if I contribute or not, right? If the market's going to do the work anyway, why bother? That's the wrong lesson. And the next chapter is going to show you exactly why. Because the decision of when you stop contributing, even temporarily, has consequences that last for decades. The gap between stopping at $100,000 and stopping at $500,000 isn't just a gap in dollars. It's a gap in what your future life looks like. It's the difference between a retirement that works and a retirement that barely limps across the finish line. The timing of when you exit, even if you plan to come back, matters more than almost anything else in this entire equation. Let's run 3 scenarios. Real numbers. Same person, same age, same market conditions, same goal. The only difference is when they stop contributing. Assume this person is 30 years old. They plan to retire at 65. They've been contributing $500 a month. The market averages 7% per year, which is a conservative but reasonable long-term assumption. And then, for some reason, they stop. Scenario 1. They stop at $100,000. They've done well to get there. This is real money. They feel proud of it. But then life happens, a career change, a house, a family, and the contributions just stop. Not forever, they tell themselves, it's just for now. But they never go back. At 7% annual growth, $100,000 left completely untouched for 35 years, grows to roughly $1,067,000. Just over $1 million. That sounds fine, doesn't it? Until you account for inflation, which cuts that future million's actual spending power roughly in half. So, they're retiring on about $500,000 of purchasing power. That's not comfortable. That's careful. Scenario 2. They stop at $300,000. Same person, same conditions, except they kept contributing long enough to reach $300,000 before stopping. Now they leave cash alone for the remaining years to retirement. At 7% over 35 years. Wait, this person would have fewer years left since they contributed longer. So let's say 25 years of growth. $300,000 becomes roughly $1,629,000. Now, they're retiring with real purchasing power closer to $800,000 to $900,000 in today's dollars. That's a different life. That's traveling. That's helping children or grandchildren. That's not checking the account balance every week with low-grade anxiety. Scenario 3. They stop at $500,000. They stayed disciplined longer. They pushed through the middle years when motivation was low and contributions felt redundant. They reached $500,000, and then they stopped. At 7% over 20 years, because it took longer to get here, $500,000 becomes roughly $1,934,000. Nearly $2 million. Real purchasing power. Now, that's a retirement. That's freedom without risks. Here's the brutal truth that comes out of these three scenarios. The difference between stopping at $100,000 and stopping at $500,000 is the difference between a retirement with anxiety and a retirement with choices. In the hours you worked to earn those extra contributions, in the context of a 35-year investing timeline, they were some of the highest value hours of your entire life. Not because of what they earned, but because of what they set in motion. The stopping point matters enormously. And what makes it even more striking is that the journey from $0 to $500,000 and the journey from $500,000 to $1 million don't take the same amount of time. Not even close. In fact, halfway to your number isn't really halfway at all. Here's something nobody tells you. And when you hear it, something about the early years of investing suddenly makes a lot more sense. The first half of the journey takes much longer than the second half. Not a little longer. Dramatically longer. You could grind for 15 or 20 years to reach the halfway point, and then watch the second half happen in half the time without doing anything differently at all. That sounds impossible, but it's just how compounding works. Think of it like pushing a snowball down a hill. At the top, the snowball is small. You're pushing hard. Progress feels slow. Every push takes real effort, and the snowball barely seems to grow. You start to wonder if this is even working. You start to wonder if you're doing something wrong. But the snowball is growing. Quietly. Slowly. And as it grows, something changes. It starts picking up snow on its own. Not because you're pushing harder, but because there's simply more surface area to collect it. The bigger it gets, the faster it gets bigger. And eventually, you're not really pushing anymore. The hill is doing the work. The momentum is doing the work. You're just making sure it stays on course. That's what the second half of building wealth feels like. The same market conditions that felt almost useless early on, because the portfolio was too small for them to matter much, become genuinely powerful once the portfolio is large enough to take full advantage of them. This is why the early years feel brutal and discouraging. It isn't because you're failing. It's because you're at the top of the hill with a small snowball, pushing hard, and the results feel invisible. That's not a sign that something's broken. That's just what the beginning of compounding feels like from the inside. The people who quit during this phase never find out what was waiting on the other side of it. And what's waiting is a version of the journey that feels completely different, where the heavy lifting shifts away from you, and the momentum you spent years building quietly starts doing the work instead. You were never meant to feel this slow forever. The slowness is the foundation. And once it's built, the second half of the journey doesn't just get easier. It feels like a different game entirely. There's a concept that captures this perfectly, one that explains not just why it gets easier, but why it gets easier so suddenly. Here's how to figure out your own version of this. You need 4 things, and you probably already know most of them. Your retirement goal, your current portfolio balance, how many years until you plan to retire, and an expected annual growth rate. Use 7% as a conservative, historically grounded estimate. Some advisors use 6, some use 8. 7 is a reasonable middle ground. Then you do one calculation. Take your current balance and multiply it by growth factor. The growth factor for 7% over a given number of years is calculated as 1.07 raised to the power of however many years you have left. If that sounds complicated, don't worry. There are free calculators everywhere online that do this instantly. Type in your balance, your rate, your years, and it gives you the number. No math degree required. But let's walk through it the slow way so it actually sinks in. Say you're 45 years old. You have $250,000 saved. You plan to retire at 65. That's 20 years. 1.07 raised to the power of 20 is approximately 3.87. Multiply $250,000 by 3.87, and you get roughly $967,000. So, if your retirement goal is $1 million and you have $250,000 today, and you're 20 years out, you're almost there. Market growth alone nearly gets you to the finish line without another dollar contributed. Now adjust for your own numbers. Maybe your goal is $2 million. Maybe you're 35 and you have $100,000. Maybe you're 50 with $600,000. The math changes, but the framework stays the same. You're asking, what will be my balance and retirement age? The gap between that number and your goal is the amount that future contributions still need to cover. For some people, running this calculation for the first time is quietly shocking. They've been grinding for 15 years, feeling behind, feeling like they're nowhere near enough, and then they run the numbers and realize that growth alone puts them within $200,000 of their goal. And $200,000 at $500 a month is about 33 months of contributions. Less than 3 years. 3 years of contributions, after 15 years of feeling like retirement was still impossibly far away. That's the moment the seesaw tips. That's when a machine takes over. And knowing your specific number, not just a vague sense that you should save more, is what makes the difference between anxiety and clarity. But there's another number worth knowing. A number that arrives before full retirement. A number that most people never see coming, but that changes how you feel about your work, your paycheck, and your daily life. It's the moment your portfolio earns more in a year than your job does. Now, you can see the finish line with actual clarity. You know the machine is running. You know the math is working. You were never supposed to contribute forever. That was never the deal. The deal was to contribute long enough, consistently enough, that the portfolio could eventually take over. Long enough to build the mass that compounding needs to do its work. And once it does, once you've built it, reach that momentum, cross that invisible line, the portfolio doesn't need you the way it used to. It just needs you to protect it, to leave it alone, to let it do what you built it to do. Because remember, you were never building a savings account. You were building a machine that was always designed to run on its own.